What if they don't buy it? What if they don't buy it and they conclude her claim is not valid? What's the recourse for? Will she be deported?
Yes. In short, yes. Now, she files for something. Asylum, Vawa, both of them. Right? Maybe she goes to trial on both of them. Maybe she's denied on both of them. Then that decision becomes final in 33 days if she doesn't appeal it. So she has a choice. She either accepts the judge's decision or she appeals the judge's decision. By the way, if she wins, the Department of Homeland Security could also appeal that decision. Right? So just because she's happy with the result doesn't mean the government's happy with the result. Now, if she files for, let's say she files an asylum application and a VAWA application, and the I-360 gets approved, and then she goes and asks the judge to terminate proceedings and remand it down to the USCIS, and they do so, right? So what happens to her asylum claim? Well, the judge may ask her to withdraw it. It's a possibility, with prejudice or without prejudice. But for purposes of conversation, she gets remanded back to USCIS, and the USCIS grants her her citizenship. I'm sorry, her green card. But what happens if they don't? So now she's withdrawn her asylum application, and her VAWA is denied. But in this example, it would likely be denied because she commits a crime, or there's something else that happens after the fact. Because we know I-360 was already approved. So we know she's documented that she was married to a U.S. citizen, that she's a good moral person, and that she suffered extreme cruelty. Now she's being interviewed by an asylum officer, by a USCIS officer, not an asylum officer, and maybe she lied. Maybe there's inconsistencies in her story. Maybe she committed a subsequent crime, like shoplifting that we talked about before, and it might negatively impact her case. Or maybe she committed a crime while she was in Guatemala, subject to the abuse. Well, she'd have to prove that. She'd have to prove that the crime was as a result of the abuse, not something else. And now, again, if she's denied, she can appeal the Board of Immigration Appeals. There will be a briefing schedule, maybe there's going to be oral argument, and then there's going to be a decision. That decision, again, becomes final only if it doesn't get appealed. And if it gets appealed, it goes to the circuit court. In New Jersey, we're in the Third Circuit, so it would go to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Then there's a decision there. That decision is final unless it gets appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And that's the final law of the land. Now, you can request to file an appeal to the Supreme Court. Doesn't mean the Supreme Court is going to accept it. And at any point, the Board of Immigration Appeals or the Third Circuit Court or the Supreme Court might say, hey, you know what? There was a problem at the trial level, and could remand the case back to the trial level to fix something. Maybe now we're 8 years later. The law changed. Maybe the facts changed. Maybe she was accused of a crime, and then the case was decided, and then she was ultimately not convicted of that crime. So, but the fact that she was charged a judge might have found that she wasn't a good moral person. Give you an example. I have a case right now where someone was accused of horrible sex abuse of a minor, right? But it was an accusation. At the end of the day, the case wasn't proven. He was placed on probation, and a year later, the charges would have been dismissed, but he's been detained by the federal government. He's not been able to complete the requirements of probation. So the government has tried to argue that he's not a good moral person because we don't know why he was put into probation, which is irrelevant. Or because he might not comply with the requirements of probation, and he could ultimately be convicted of the crime. But our position is the government can't have it both ways. Either release him and let him comply, let him at least try, or don't, but you can't punish him for not having done it when you haven't let him do it. So again, the law is constantly evolving and constantly changing, but that is one scenario that could impact Maria if she's accused of a crime while this is going on. Depending on the severity, even after she gets a green card, if she commits a serious enough crime, they could try to put her into removal and take away a green card. The only people that can commit crimes and not get deported are typically U.S. citizens.